Mr. President.
Senator from Oregon.
President, I appreciate the comments my colleague from Maryland, who has argued so well that the time has come to take a bold step in favor of equality, in favor of fairness, and pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. I, too, rise to speak to the importance of this action. The Declaration of Independence, in its second paragraph, says, in words that are famous and well known to all Americans, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Certainly, that vision of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is infused into everything we pursue in this nation for the success of individuals and the success of our families and the success of our communities and the success of our nation. And the debate on which we are about to embark is deeply connected to this debate, because certainly the ability to be free from discrimination in the pursuit of a job and to be free from discrimination in the course of employment is central to that pursuit of happiness. It is central to the issue of liberty. I rise today to say how important and vital this is to millions of Americans for whom discrimination has blocked and compromised the vision laid out in the Declaration of Independence. And this bill, this framework for ending discrimination in employment, Senate Bill 815, is born with a lot of bipartisan partners whom I'd like to thank at this moment. It was back in 2009, my first year in the U.S. Senate, that Senator Kennedy and his team asked me to take leadership of this bill that he had held near and dear to his heart, to carry the torch forward in fighting for fairness in employment, fighting for an end to discrimination. And since that time, many have stepped forward to be partners in this journey. Senator Collins was the first chief co-sponsor from the Republican side, stepping forward and taking her voice and her energy and her experience and her insight to bear. And after 2 years, she passed the baton to Senator Mark Kirk, who's been a longtime champion of the vision of fairness and equality for all Americans. Both of them have done an outstanding and extraordinary job in forwarding this dialogue. And on the Democratic side, we have first and foremost Senator Kennedy, who carried this leadership for many years, including back in 1996 when we had this on the floor of the Senate. And I'll return to that in due course. He's a champion for civil rights in many, many different parts of our world, including race discrimination and gender discrimination and discrimination against the LGBT community. And Senator Harkin, who chairs the Health, Education, and Labor Committee that carried this bill forward through two hearings in 2009 and 2012, who carried it forward in the markup this last year and who'd prepared to send it to the floor. Thank you, Senator Harkin, for your leadership. And Senator Tammy Baldwin, who came to us with her personal story, who came to us with her experience of leadership from the House to extend the conversation here in the Senate, and has carried on so many individual meetings to speak to these core issues of equality and fairness and opportunity. So thank you to this bipartisan set of sponsors, and thank you to everyone who last night said, yes, we should debate this issue. We should debate this issue of discrimination blocking full opportunity for millions of Americans. And so shortly we will be engaged in that debate. After the Declaration of Independence, we had the preamble to the Constitution. And this also is well known to Americans across the land. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America. So here we have those core concepts of justice and the blessings of liberty for that generation, the generations that would follow. What exactly is liberty? What is freedom? Senator Kennedy, in 1965, in a commencement address to Howard University, said, "Freedom is the right to share fully and equally in American society, to vote, to hold a job, to enter a public place, to go to a school." Senator Johnson continued, "It is the right to be treated in every," President Johnson continued, "it is the right to be treated in every part of our national life as a person equal in dignity and promise to all others." I think it's a pretty good description of what liberty and freedom means. A right to participate fully in American society, in every respect, at the voting booth, in the job place, and in the public square as you would choose to participate. So the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which ends discrimination against our LGBT community, is rooted in the best of American values. It's rooted in the concepts of liberty and freedom in our founding documents and our founding vision. It's rooted in the concept of fundamental fairness. How unfair is it if an individual who is seeking to apply to a job cannot have a full opportunity for that job, a full opportunity to thrive because of discrimination? How fair is it, because of who you are outside of the workplace, that you are fired from the workplace? Let us think of the golden rule. We all learned this early in life, that we should treat others according to how we would want to be treated. And we would all want to be treated with respect and dignity that President Johnson referred to. It is a vision of equality that was in the Declaration of Independence, and it's the vision of opportunity that's rooted so deeply in the American dream. The idea that in America, if you work and study hard, you can do just about anything. No, that's a vision my father gave to me when he took me to the schoolhouse doors when I was small, and he said, if you go through those doors and you study hard here in America, you can do just about anything. But discrimination takes away from that vision of opportunity. It says, if you study hard here in America, you can do just about anything unless you have a certain color of skin, unless you have a certain gender, unless you have a certain gender identity or sexual orientation. Now, we've struck down many of those barriers. We've advanced on this vision of equality, but we have further to go. That's what this debate is about. In 29 states, you can still be fired from the job. You can still be told not to apply in the beginning because of your sexual orientation or your gender identity. In 29 states. It should not be the case that the vision of equality and fairness and opportunity happens to occur on one side of a state line, but is destroyed if you cross that state line. Because this vision of opportunity and fairness and equality that's in our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence didn't say that this vision is only if you live in particular states, only if you live in the 21 states that have protections for our lesbian, gay, and bisexual community, or only if you live in the 17 states that have protections of employment for our transgender community. The journey of this legislation began in 1974. It was a year after Stonewall. 39 years ago. Bella Abzug and Ed Koch introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives legislation that would ban job discrimination. And it took another 19 years before such legislation was introduced here in the U.S. Senate. And hearings were held in the Labor and Human Resources Committee in 1994. And it was 2 years later that the bill was debated here on this chamber, right here, in this very room. And the outcome was 49 for, 50 against, with Vice President Gore sitting right now in the presiding chair where the senator from Hawaii sits. Now, Vice President Gore had already clarified where he stood. So we were missing one senator and one vote. And the result is it's been 17 years since this conversation was held in this chamber. 17 years of discrimination through so many states across America. It's time to end that discrimination and enhance the vision of equality and fairness. Well, today we have a bill that has before us 55 co-sponsors. Now, when we think about that 49-50 vote 17 years ago, we might say, well, isn't this a done deal? There are 55 co-sponsors. You only need 51 or 50 plus the vice president to pass a bill in the U.S. Senate. But it's not a done deal because in the last decade and a half, the Senate has gone from being a simple majority chamber as envisioned in the Constitution to being a chamber where every action takes a supermajority vote. We needed a supermajority of 60 to get onto the bill last night. And everyone anticipates we'll need 60 votes to get off the bill, that is to close debate and have a final vote. That's not the Senate that's been with us through 200 years. It's the Senate of the last 10 years, where the courtesy of extended debate has been turned into the veto of a supermajority. But that is where we stand right now. And therefore, we need 60 votes. And we had 61 votes last night to get onto this debate. And I thank every one of those 61 senators who stood up and said, yes, after 17 years, it's time to debate this issue. Yes, it is right to consider issue of core fairness to millions of Americans. Yes, it is right to recognize that we should have a debate about the impact of discrimination on the ability of the individual to have full opportunity in our nation. So thank you to the 61 senators who stood up last night. Have no doubt, discrimination is alive and well. I'll share with you a story of Laura from Portland, Oregon. Before Oregon had non-discrimination clauses, which we adopted in 2007. And she notes that from 1980 to 1996, she worked for the Josephine County Sheriff's Office in Grants Pass, Oregon. She had the rank of sergeant. She was promoted often. She worked as a variety of capacities, including as a SWAT team commander, as a detective in the Major Crimes Unit, and in the Narcotics Task Force. During her 16 years, she notes, she says, I received numerous commendations, including commendations for removing an automobile accident victim from a burning vehicle, delivering a baby alongside a roadside, disarming an armed man intent on harming himself. She was awarded for her expertise and diligence shown in a number of complicated criminal cases. She was named Deputy of the Year in 1994. She taught law enforcement classes at Royal Community College and at the Oregon Police Academy. She had a distinguished employment record. But then, on Labor Day 1995, she was in a remote area when a police dog attacked her and did some damage to her leg, and she was put on administrative leave. And during the month that followed, her storage unit was broken into. And out of the storage unit came information that she was a transgender individual. And because of that, she was fired. Stellar career in every aspect. but a break into her storage unit plus discrimination ended that career. She ends her commentary by saying, had employment non-discrimination laws been in effect, I likely would have continued serving the citizens of Josephine County to this day. And we know from her employment record that she would have been well served. But that was before Oregon adopted anti-discrimination legislation. Many people have written to share their stories. Terry from Aloha wrote, "Thank you for continuing the fight against discrimination. I am retired now, but I did lose a job when I was young for being a lesbian. Until later in life, I stayed deep in the closet to keep from losing another job. All of the non-discrimination bills help us define who we are as a people," she continues, "and underscores our belief in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for every American." By one survey, far more than a third of individuals, LGBT individuals, have experienced some form of harassment or discrimination in the workplace. That's a tremendous impact on the pursuit of happiness. That's a tremendous shrinking of freedom and liberty as envisioned in our founding documents, our vision for this nation. Now, there are a number of issues that have been raised as colleagues have talked about this bill before it comes to the floor here, and I wanted to address some of them. First, this bill is fully inclusive. It includes the lesbian, the gay, the bisexual, and the transgender community. It should be fully inclusive because discrimination is wrong. Discrimination shrinks opportunity. Discrimination is an offense against liberty and freedom in our nation, the full participation in society. So, of course, this bill should be fully inclusive, as it is in 17 of the 21 states that have laws in their books right now. A second issue has been concern about lawsuits. And we heard this yesterday from the Speaker of the House. But we have all of these pilots, if you will, 21 states with measures on the books, all kinds of experience. So I asked the General Accounting Office to do an updated study of the issue of lawsuits. And what do we find out? There's been no abuse. There's been no extraordinary stream of unfounded lawsuits against businesses, no damage to business. None at all. In Oregon, LGBT discrimination claims are less than 2% of the total number of employment discrimination claims. It's less than 1 out of 50. In other states, it's ranged from 2 to 6%. That's a small number. And it's why the business community has remained so supportive. Far more than half, in fact, close to 90% of the Fortune 500 companies have non-discrimination practices they have adopted on their own. They have adopted it because it's good business. Nike, in my home state of Oregon, says, quote, ENDA is good for business, for our employees, and for our communities. Continues the Nike statement to say that inclusive non-discrimination policies, quote, enable us to attract and retain the best and brightest people around the world. That's why Fortune 500 companies have lined up to adopt non-discrimination provisions. Because what is good for liberty, what is good for opportunity, is good for business. And the GAO study shows that any claim that there has been a problem with excessive lawsuits is simply false. A third concern is about the religious exemption. The religious exemption in this bill is deeply founded on Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So there's a whole history of interpretation and understanding exactly where the boundaries are. This is the same religious exemption that was voted in favor of in the U.S. House of Representatives by a measure of 420 to 25. 420 to 25 said this is the right foundation to make sure that we create the balance for religious organization. There are others who are concerned that simply the American people are not ready for this discussion, despite the fact that it's been adopted in 21 states, despite the fact that we've had many related issues before the American public up for discussion, including hate crimes, the Matthew Shepard Hate Crimes Act. We've had Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We've had a Supreme Court discussion about marriage equality. Certainly, the Americans are well familiar with this. In fact, 80% of Americans think we've already done this. I was explaining to my daughter, Bryn, about this fight against discrimination and its terrible impacts on liberty and freedom and opportunity. And she said, "But Dad, people can't fire others because they're lesbian or gay, right?" She said, "That's not possible." And I said, "Sweetie, it was possible right here in Oregon until a couple years ago, when in 2007 we adopted non-discrimination policies, non-discrimination statutes for our state." And she just shook her head. And it took me back to when I was in high school, and I was hearing about Jim Crow systems of discrimination against those with dark skin instead of lighter skin. And I thought, that's not possible. Not under our vision of opportunity and equality of our Constitution and our pursuit of happiness. It's not possible. But it was possible, and it was very real well after I was born. But we ended that discrimination, and it's time to end this discrimination. This is about the individual, but it's about our nation as well. It's certainly about the vision of the Declaration of Independence that has the promise of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as the founding motivation. It certainly is about our Constitution that says the core purpose is to secure the blessings of liberty. Because certainly you do not have liberty if you do not have the full opportunity to participate in the workplace across America. Senator Ted Kennedy, who carried this battle until days before his death. In fact, the quote I'm about to share is from August 5th, 2009. He died just 20 days later. This may well have been one of his last public comments. And introducing the 2009 bill may well have been one of his last legislative acts. And he said, "The promise of America will never be fulfilled as long as justice is denied to even one among us." I urge my colleagues, take a stand for equality. Take a stand for fundamental fairness. Take a stand for the vision of the pursuit of happiness embedded in our Constitution. Take a stand for justice for all. Support this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.